Hi, everyone. My name is Jennifer Hancock. I am on the board of the USA chapter for the International Humanistic Management Association, USA chapter. And I am also the founder of Humanist Learning Systems and one of the co-hosts for this Lunch and Learn series. Elizabeth is my co-host. Hello, Elizabeth.
Hi, good to see everyone. I'm Elizabeth Castillo at California State University, San Bernardino. I'm the president of the U.S. chapter of the International Humanistic Management Association, and we are so happy you're here today. Thank you for joining us.
Wonderful. Our guest today, I have been wanting Craig on for a really long time, and he finally said yes. So, Dr. Craig Nathanson is an educator, author, speaker, and coach for midlife development. He is the creator of the Humanistic Leadership Model and the Joyful Work Model, and as a new way to better lead oneself and others positively and sustainably. He has a PhD in Human and Organizational Systems, an MA in Human Development, and an MS in Telecommunications Management. He has taught on-site and online graduate, undergraduate programs since 2001 at several universities in North America, Europe, China, and Vietnam. So welcome, Craig.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. By the way, it's great to see a lot of you. Most of my students on Zoom tend to keep their cameras off, and I feel like I'm speaking to myself. So it's a pleasure for me to be here. It's an honor for me to be here and speak to you, and to take questions. I'm going to talk just for a few minutes, 10 or 15 minutes, about a few ideas, and then we'll open it up for discussion. Anyway, thank you all for the time today. So people often ask me, what is this thing called humanistic leadership, and more importantly, why is it essential? So back in 2015, after a long corporate senior management tour, 20 plus years, and then another 23 years of teaching around the world. Don't do the math on that, by the way. Back in 2015, I started to get concerned. There was a lot of my students were always confused between the differences between leadership and management. And of course, they seldom mentioned the idea of coaching. So, after doing some research, I realized there hadn't been really a new leadership kind of theory that's come out in, 25 years or so. And so I decided to come up with a new model really for myself, and to be able to explain to my students, at a fundamental level that, the differences between leading, which is the vision, selling the tickets for the journey, management, which is driving the bus, all those things of management, goal setting, measuring, performance review, and, making sure people get to where they need to go. And then, of course, coaching, which is the support, giving people on the bus what they need to get to the final destination in good shape. So I started with that. But then I started to think deeper, and I thought to myself, the world's in tough shape. We have lots of issues. We'll leave it at that. And I felt like, the way we have either, I have 4 kids, and I tried my best, they're all grown now, but, the way we parent, the way we lead ourselves, the way we lead others, the way we, teach our students, lead our communities, nations, and the world, I thought, where has it really gotten us in the last 200 years? Humans have been around about 200,000 years, and it seemed like to me at the time that it was only getting worse. And so I thought, wow, I feel kind of a sense of urgency now about sustainability. So this was back in 2015. So I started writing about humanistic leadership. I published a book called The Best Manager. Now that I look back, book was kind of primitive because it didn't have any of my current thinking. But at the time, if you typed into Google humanistic leadership, you saw my work, you saw other people's work, but there wasn't much out there. And then, we had the pandemic in 2020. And I thought to myself, if there ever was a time for us to come together as a humanity with a common problem to fix, if there's anything good that would come out of the pandemic, it would be that. And for a while, it worked. We all stayed home. We all reflected on our lives. We looked at what was important. And of course, here we are in 2023. And as usual, as human behavior is, we've all gone back to our old ways of being. And so thus I have I don't know how to say it. I have a greater sense of urgency than ever before, that we need a new way forward in how we lead ourselves and others if seriously we want to be sustainable. I tell this to my 19-year-old students at University of San Francisco, and they have this this expression on their face. But the new generations, Gen Z, millennials who are now becoming managers for the first time in their 30s, they get it. They grew up on their phones. They grew up through collaboration. They get it. And so I think the world is ready for humanistic leadership. So I know through all of our work here, of course, we're trying to do that. So to me, humanistic leadership is a mindset. It's not a theory. It's a mindset. It's a way of being in the world. What is it? It's about being empathetic towards people. It's working in harmony. It's working collectively. Like in the United States, it's difficult for us because we're an individualistic society. We kind of look at our own, try to optimize ourselves and sub-optimize everyone else. Asian cultures are much better, where I teach a lot in being collective, but we need to be collective, and I think that's part of humanistic leadership to build harmony and positive relationships. So this is the focus of my life's work. So I created this model, a humanistic leadership model, as a structure, as kind of a holistic structure, a model to kind of think about how I go about doing this. And that's really the next question I get is, okay, this is fine, Craig, but how do I really do this? So the humanistic leadership model has 4 levels, and I think I'll just touch on the first 3 levels at the moment, and then we can kind of open this up. So the first level deals with self-awareness. I think it's very difficult to lead other people if you can't lead yourself. And most of us are not self-aware because unless we had enlightened parents or we had an enlightened professor, or unless, as for my research on joyful work, I've written books on this subject. This is another one of the areas of my life that I spend helping people find joyful work, because I also think the world would be a better place if we all did what we love. But, unless you're between 35 and 45, people between 35 and 45 tend to have one of 5 things happen to them: a relationship issue, a financial issue, an illness, a job layoff. Or for about 80% of the people in my research between 35 and 45, we go to bed at night with angst. We lay there and we think to ourselves, I was busy today, but doing what? and did I make a difference in the world? And is this what the rest of my life will look like? And so there's an opportunity for all of us in the middle part of our lives to not have a midlife crisis, as the literature calls for, but a midlife crusade, and to rewrite a new chapter of our lives. But you're never too old, never too young for this. So the bottom line is most of us are not self-aware. So what does it mean to become self-aware? Because I think that's a prerequisite for humanistic leadership. Well, in short, I have a lot of ideas on this, but I think it starts with purpose. What is the purpose of your life? And if I heard this in my 20s, it would be so esoteric, I wouldn't know what to do with this. But really what it means is, and I ask all of you on this call, where is your energy right now? Where do you want to make a difference? Where do you want to make a difference in the world? I think it starts with that. If I was to take all of you on a field trip to a physical bookstore, and they don't really exist anymore, for 2 hours, what part of the bookstore would you go to? And we tend to go to different parts of the bookstore, metaphorically speaking, during different times of our life. So, where is your energy right now? So, plant that seed. Where is your energy? Where is your purpose? And then aligning purpose to values. We all know this is so important, but what's most important to you? What are the 3 to 5 things that are most important to you in your life? And how do you know if you're following them? And how do you know if you're not? I call that operating rules. If you don't write down, well, family is most important to me, and here's what I would have to do today to be true to those values, and here's what I would have to do to not follow those values. So I think aligning values is important. For my research, most people spend most of their day doing things that have nothing to do with their core values, and then they wonder why they have angst late at night as they're trying to fall asleep. So I think part of being self-aware is aligning values, purpose, and if you figured out your values, you could back into your purpose a bit, and vice versa. We all need goals in life, and I think aligning your long-term goals, your medium-term goals, your short-term goals to your values can really give you a personal roadmap for your life. So when we have a personal roadmap, an authentic roadmap for our life, we tend to be very self-aware, and therefore we tend to be very self-aware with others. I also think part of being self-aware is being humble, having humility. Before age 30, it's important to build what's called ego. Ego gives us a sense of social identity, self-esteem. If you go to a party and you're under 30 and someone says, hey, what's up? What do? You answer with your job title. and the other person tells you their job title, and everybody walks away happy. But after 30, some of you may already know this, of course, you go to a party and someone asks you what you do, you talk about who you are versus what you do, because no one could take away who you are but anybody could take away, what you do. So I think it's important, especially as we get over 30, it's never too late, never too early to be humble, to have humility. I think also having tolerance. I also think, for my research, I don't believe it's possible to remove our bias. We all have them from our collective history, but I think part of being self-aware is understanding our biases. What is it? Where do they come from? Understanding it, and then working really hard to minimize the bias so it doesn't get in the way of our relationships with people. When I teach my students the topic of diversity, I focus on just two words, two very important words: inclusion and appreciation. How can we all include and appreciate people who are different than us? Again, if we could just do that, the world would be a better place. So these are all, examples of self-awareness, being calm, being a person of integrity, being optimistic. 23 years ago, I left corporate America, gave it all up and walked out the door. And it was very risky, took a lot of courage, but I've never looked back. And I think part of being self-aware is, in fact, having the courage to kind of pave an authentic life that makes a difference to you and others. In the chat, or I received some of the questions for this session today. Someone had asked, where does ethics fit in? It absolutely fits in here in self-awareness. I think what I try to teach and tell people is that, do my actions, make a positive difference to other people and society? And if they do, then I think you're an ethical person. If not, well, then I think you have to question that. So I think, I think part of being, ethics fits in right here. All right, so let's say you've done a really good job of becoming self-aware, which is a lifelong process. But let's say you feel pretty good about that. You've run into people where you talk to them and they're really looking at you, they're centered, they're focused. That tends to mean they're pretty self-aware. And of course, we've run into people who we start talking to, before we know it, they start talking about themselves and how that conversation goes. So I think before leading other people, we have to be able to lead ourselves. The second tier of the model is systems thinking. Now, systems thinking is, in fact, a theory. We don't really think about this too much, but to be a systems thinker is to understand that, everything is connected in the world, and I think to be a humanistic leader, you have to have high levels of conscientiousness. That's one of the personality traits. If you're high in conscientiousness, you think before speaking, you think before you behave. You think about, there's a term in systems thinking called unintended consequences. So in other words, every time we make a decision, or we act out or say something, things will occur that we didn't expect. And so as a humanistic leader, you must be a systems thinker. You must understand that everything in life is a system. Our body is a system. Your family unit is a system. Society is a system. Our organizations are systems. And a systems thinker must always be looking at the system. How is the system performing? Where is it embryonic? Where is it mature? Where are there broken links? It's very important one of the most important things of a leader, humanistic leader, aside from enabling joy at work, and that's, I think, the most important thing to measure at work, the amount of joy that people have. It's another topic, is, in fact, to monitor and measure the system. The structure of any system, you all probably know this, of course, will determine the behavior of those who work within the system. So this is really important also, is to understand that the structures that we set up, will of course influence and enable the behavior. Part of being a systems thinker is to do what I call synthesis versus analysis. When we just do analysis, we're just looking at discrete pieces of data. But synthesis is looking at everything in the system and seeing how they fit. I'll give you an example. For 20 years before the pandemic, as a professor, I would do what most professors do in the physical classroom before Zoom. I would come in with my PowerPoint slides, and I always thought I was a pretty passionate, pretty good teacher. But, I just put up my slides for the benefit of the students. It wasn't for me. I knew what I was speaking about. And it always occurred to me that students didn't listen as well. They always would just stare at the slides and be writing as quickly as possible, the notes. And I always thought, why don't you just bring the slides to class? So during the pandemic, I'm a systems thinker, and, like all of us, we were home. We had more time on our hands. I thought, how could I improve my teaching? So I decided I would never again use PowerPoint slides in the classroom. I would record all my lectures in advance, and give them to students in advance. They could look at the lectures and the PowerPoint slides whenever they want. And instead, I would just talk to students. And that's how I've been teaching ever since the last 3 years. We just talk. Of course, I have them do breakout groups and so on. But students have said they've enjoyed the teaching that much more. Their learning is deeper. And I, of course, have really, really, really loved my teaching even more. Just like now, I could have done a PowerPoint presentation now, but which at first felt more secure, right? But in the end, this is what I love to do. So that's an example. As a systems thinker, you're always trying to figure out how to do synthesis. Where are things not working, and how could you fix them? And lastly, before I open it up for questions, the last tier, well, there's 4 tiers. I guess I should explain those. The third tier is to be humanistic, and this is a topic that all of you, of course, understand. What does it mean to me to be humanistic? To treat people with kindness, to treat people at work, especially, as partners. I don't like to work in the word employees. I never did. Treat people as partners, as equal partners. Show empathy, be ethical, have compassion, have integrity, all of those things. Most importantly, participate as a collective whole. I think that's an important part of being humanistic, so that your actions, make the world a better place. And hopefully, if you've done enough self-awareness, you'll feel that. Now, I talk about humanistic leadership in the HLM model as putting people over profit. And I do believe that's important. Of course, to make money in business, to be profitable. I mean, you have to be profitable to stay in business. But the issue is, how do you become profitable? By running over people or working with people. But often when I start my talk with, humanistic leadership is putting people over profit, the eyes start to roll from the CEOs. And so lately I've been I have a placeholder tagline instead, although I still talk about the importance of people over profit. And the tagline is humanistic leadership, sustainability with people. And so far, no one's argued about the idea of sustainability. So maybe this will open up more eyes. An example, I like to give examples. Years ago, I had a woman who worked for me. She was an IT programmer. Her husband died of cancer. She was gone for 2 weeks. I knew she loved to work in the garden. And when she came back to work, I didn't let her come to work. I sent her to a 2-day class on how to work in the garden. I didn't tell HR, of course. And, it just seemed like the natural thing to do. Now, that caused me issues at work. I had to backfill her position and so on. But when she came back to work, she was still sad, of course, but she felt like, wow, somebody really cared about me. It's the little things we do at work that are most important. I am sorry. You really helped me. Thank you. Our team wouldn't be the same without you. You're a valuable member of the team. Those things are so important. So in conclusion, well, before I conclude, the last tier, by the way, just 30 seconds on this, of the HLM model. To the left side is leading, managing, and coaching. They're all important, like I said earlier, but they all have to come from the same person. I will get, I'm sure, questions about where does the reward and punishment and blah, 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 where does it all come in? Well, the management part has to happen, but I don't believe in reward and punishment. So we could talk about that. So leading, managing, coaching. The middle of the model talks about leadership styles. We all have different styles that we like to lead people. Some of us are more servant oriented. Some are autocratic. Some of us, although I don't recommend that, some are, task focused, structure focused, principle centered, and so on. So I think leadership behavior styles is important to lead people in ways that get positive results. And then the last part of this last tier is personality traits. I think there are, personality traits such as high emotional stability, sociability, high conscientious, being open, and so on, are good traits to. I mean, personality is wired. It's from birth. As far as we know, it's very hard to change your personality, but you can modify your behavior. And so I think there's aspects of personality traits that humanistic leaders can have. So in summary, I believe very strongly, and I have a sense of urgency that we need a new way forward in terms of how we lead ourselves and others. And this is what I'm going with as just a way to talk about this. So that's all I got. I'm happy to collaborate and answer really any and all all questions. I could talk for hours, so I'm going to stop. Sorry, Jennifer, that was more than 15 minutes.
Oh, that's fine. It was great. And I think I want to thank you for that. It always amazes me. It doesn't amaze me. It amazes me, but doesn't amaze me when we have people to come on, talk about humanism. They're all talking about the same thing and using slightly different words to describe it, to get at slightly different nuances in it. Like the question of what does it mean to be a good human being? It really has like consistency with nuance, right? And so I loved your presentation because I'm like, that's a really neat way to describe what I talk about this other way, right? I think probably everybody in the audience is having that same response. Now, the way you closed, though, brought up some of the questions we got in the pre-questions, and that has to do with, some people were like, well, how does a leadership team decide on what leadership model to use? Because a lot of these leadership models do, in fact, get to the same place, right? And you mentioned servant leadership versus autocratic, which I think probably everybody here is like recoils from. But can you talk a little bit about those models? And because it seems like your model incorporates the freedom of those other ways of leading.
Mm-hmm.
I hope that was coherent.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I mean, I use the model as just a way to structure the discussion. I want people to walk away thinking, wow, I guess I should become self-aware before I start to lead other people. And this idea of systems thinking, yeah, how can I practice that in my daily life? And what does it mean to be humanistic? And what are the differences between leading, managing, coaching, and so on? So, and what are my leadership styles? And how does personality deal with this? So all those things are things to consider versus, a CEO sitting around the table with his or her team saying, okay, which leadership style, approach are we going to use here? We're going to be transformational, servant oriented, etc. I think for example, I just gave, I'm in the process of giving workshops for companies under 200 people. And if they take my workshop, I certify them, give them the logo to put on their website as being humanistic, just to kind of, spread these ideas. And one CEO said to me a couple of weeks ago, this might help us with retention. It might help us with recruitment, because now we're talking about that we care about people. So it's really about having a discussion about, what is our philosophy here about how we work with people, more so than, we're going to use this theory or that theory or this approach. I wouldn't want anybody. That's why I struggled with, I don't want to certify any company that they're humanistic. I can't control that. But what I can do is teach these ideals, this mindset. So I don't know if that answers your question.
It does, actually. I think that's very helpful, which leads me to my next question, which is about how does this work in real life? One of the questions we've got is, what are the leadership difficulties you face, and how have you tackled those problems using these principles? Mm-hmm.
Well, in my career as a senior manager, as all of you, I'm sure, have been in senior management positions, day in and day out, especially in a public capitalistic company, we're asked to do certain things, and we have to figure out how, whether we agree or not, how to implement those ideas through our people. In 25 years of leading people, I never saw in any performance review that Craig was a great developer of people. I only saw whether my team met our objectives or not. If we did, I got rewarded. If not, we got punished. So the thing I want to say is that to be a humanistic leader of other people, you must do if you want good business results, but you'll never get credit. So the thing you must do, you will never get credit for, but you must do it because you realize as a humanistic leader, it's the day in and day out ways that you treat and talk and communicate to people that's going to get those results. This leads into my other body of work, joyful work. If people enjoy their work, for my research, all other business indicators go up. And so, I can give you hundreds of examples, but they're no different than any of your examples who have ever managed a team of people. You have outside pressures, you have the usual. I mean, in a capitalistic society, we are short-term driven. In some ways, I don't know if I should say this, in some ways, it's probably against the law, in certain countries to be humanistic, because the focus is on short-term profit, and the CEO will get sued by its shareholders if it looks like anything else is going on. I'm serious about that. So that's why I say that as a humanistic leader, it's the little things that you do that no one will notice except your people and you won't get credit for. So don't expect to get a bonus for this. However, it will lead to positive results and a positive impact on society. I don't know if that makes sense.
Wonderful. Okay, I have one last question for you, but I want to let everybody know if you've got questions, please write them down in the chat so that we can ask them on your behalf. We won't be opening up the mic for anybody. So if you've got a question, please put it in the chat and we'll be reading them for you. So Craig, my last question you just touched on for me, so it's a good fit in, has to do with, how do you implement this culturally? Right. Because you obviously work in China, you work around the world, you work in Vietnam. How does your humanistic approach and the philosophic conversations you're having around leadership and management and coaching, how does that manifest with cultural differences, or does it?
Well, it does. I think when you work with people in a different culture, you have to adapt to their norms and how they operate. When I first started, for example, teaching in China 18 years ago, I didn't understand why my students would never ask questions. I didn't understand why it was just me talking. I'd try to, teach the way I taught in America, and it didn't work. And then, quickly I realized that, Asian culture is collective. They like to work on their own. It's important to save face, not cause people to be, to feel humiliated and so on. And so I quickly learned that the best way to work with my Chinese students was to have them work in groups, and they select someone who makes a report out and so on. And so over the years, I've learned to work wonderfully with my Asian groups in Vietnam and China and other Asian countries. But anyway, what I learned was that, for example, Asian countries are much more ready. I mean, Asian countries have been practicing, on one hand, humanistic leadership, for thousands of years, because they tend to be collective. On the other hand, I must say that in many Asian cultures, historically, the managers that are probably in their 40s and 50s and 60s and 70s have been autocratic. It's just been, part of the culture to be tops down. But it's changing. I have to tell you, the older managers in Asia are realizing that the younger generation has grown up through collaboration. And yes, the younger generation still wants, rewards and wants to be promoted and so on. But they're looking, even though they can't explain this totally, they're looking for meaning at work. And, if I'm 22 and you can't help me understand how I'm going to, find meaning in my work and joyful work and so on, I'm going to go somewhere else. So I think the older, for example, Asian autocratic managers are realizing that they must change if they want to retain and recruit. Many years ago, I gave several workshops in China for the government because the managers are very interested in learning. I'll say Western ways, but let's just say humanistic ways. I'm teaching online now 2 MBA classes in China, and the focus is on humanistic leadership. I'll be in Vietnam next spring and China doing the same thing. So anyway, 2 things. You have to adapt to the cultures that you're working with. And number 2, I have been pleasantly surprised that for example, in Asia, the people are really receptive to new ideas, even though the cultures might be different. And I've taught in Eastern Europe and I teach in England, and I could give similar examples.
Thank you so much for that. I know when I go places, one of the things I try to do is understand the major philosophies of the area and tie what I'm talking about to the principles that are majorly dominant in whatever that community is. So Elizabeth, I'm seeing that we have a lot of questions coming up, so take it away.
We do. So we'll turn to the first one from Dr. Laila Alanazi. I asked this before, but I'm interested to know whether this model has been tested. Have you been collecting data or publishing your results somewhere?
No, I have been too busy teaching, and I have been writing lots of popular articles. I have one academic article that was published by Excelsior College where I teach. but I would call it more of a popular article than, than a serious academic article. I would love to do that, but I just have not, unfortunately, had the time. So as far as testing it, no, I don't have empirical data at this point, but my intuition tells me it makes sense. It does work. The only data I have is from, several thousand students over the past 4 or 5 years who said this makes sense. I have a lot of those students, calling, I think I've been teaching these ideas for 20 years, even though back, 15 years ago, I didn't call it humanistic leadership. So the 20-year-olds that I taught 20 years ago are now 40, and they're calling me up to work with their organizations now that they're managers. So I would say, based on the response I get, I haven't seen anybody like when I give talks on joyful work, there's always somebody in the back of the room that goes, "So you're the person that's going to help me enjoy my work, huh?" Like it's my fault. But with humanistic leadership, I haven't had anybody react negatively, like, "Oh, this is a stupid idea." So unfortunately, no, I don't have any empirical research, but this is one of those things where I just think it makes sense.
Well, it sounds like it's ripe for taking it to the next step. I mean,
Yeah.
that you have the conceptual layout. So now it would be just, setting up a way to get it tested. So maybe our forum here could be a helpful
I
thing.
would
if
love
anybody
to
is
publish
interested in that.
something with some of you on this. Absolutely, to pair up with 3 or 4 people, since I don't have the time and collaborate. Absolutely. So make a note of that. Yeah.
Well, we
Okay.
actually do have writing groups that get together and on topics. So we'll definitely, and for other people, if you're interested as well, reach out to us, because that is one of the things that IMA does.
Good. I appreciate the question.
Yeah. So the next one, what does the term sustainability mean in concrete terms, and how do we operationalize it? And that's from Bruce at Lehigh University.
Well, I think you have to look at it on an individual level. I won't tell you my age, but I want to be doing what I'm doing for the next 30 or 40 years at the same level, at the same energy. I do what I love all day long, and I feel much younger. I have more energy than ever before. And I think I'm keeping myself sustainable, by doing what I love and focusing on things like this that are very important to me. So I think at an individual level, we all have to get rest and eat well and exercise, but more importantly, spend most of our lives doing things that are authentic to ourselves. So that's what it means to me on an individual level. And I teach people a roadmap on how to do that with their joyful work. Different topic. On an organizational level, look, I don't need to sugarcoat this. I mean, if you look around the world, a lot of our organizational models are falling apart through greed and geopolitics and the fact that we're continuing to pull resources from the earth, but we're not putting anything back in. When we're pulling up coal, it's 1 million years old and expecting us to be sustainable. I think we're fooling ourselves. It's a different topic. So I think organizationally, there are a lot of companies that continue to be very profitable, but there's a lot of companies that have struggled since COVID. I think the real answer is we have a new generation of workers. For example, in the U.S., over 40% of the workers are under 35 years old, and they grew up with just different ideals, even though they were raised by Gen X parents who were very reward and punishment oriented. But kids who grew up under the boomers, like me, the millennials, I think they're ready for change. So I think it's time to to make this operational, if you will. I would say, so from my view, yes, there are a lot of companies that have made a lot of money and developed a lot of products and all of that. But if I look at humanity, if I look at the big picture, many experts have said, and this isn't me, that our species could be extinct in 50 or 60 years. I don't know about you, that's pretty scary to me. And I could see that, and we could all see that. And you know what I'm talking about. So I think it's time for a new way forward. And the best way to operate, to implement this, is to be humanistic, to start today. That's all. That was a big ramble. I don't know if I have a good answer for that.
Yeah, no, and I really love that you brought it. So often sustainability seems like a concept out there, right? Versus like we've got to live it and enact it. So that's terrific. Ravi Chitna has a question. How do you reconcile diametrically opposing positions that cannot be reconciled? For example, current warring parties in Ukraine and Gaza.
Well, I think if That's a tough question. I want to go straight to, I think peace is the only solution. And I think the tenets, the principles of humanistic leadership can solve problems like that, but we have to be willing to do that. When there's thousands of years of history, it's, we haven't solved that yet. But I think, as leaders of any party, internalize what it means to be humanistic and to be collective. Those people have to step forward. It takes two to dance, right? So I think everything that we're talking about here can be used absolutely to prevent war, to prevent conflicts like we see all over the world right now. But it takes courage. It takes people willing to kind of put their positions aside and be willing to try a new approach. We have no choice, but we have to find one common denominator, which is we all live on this place called Earth. And, we're not treating it very well, and we're not treating each other very well. And so without getting into politics, of course, and I'm certainly not qualified to do that, I do think that humanistic leadership is the way. I don't see much of that in the world right now. I will say that. And every morning I wake up, I look for something new, and I don't see anything. And this gives me more of a sense of urgency.
I want to follow up with that if I can, and kind of bring the question back to a more mundane workplace problem. And that is that even if you are practicing self-awareness, even if you are practicing, systems thinking and whatnot, you're still going to come across people who are not,
Right.
So how does someone who is practicing humanistic leadership and self-leadership, how does that help us deal with, say, a psychopath or a bully in the workplace, or someone who's very authoritarian in the workplace? Because these are real problems that we get. Everybody wants to know, okay, I want to do this, but what about the people who don't, and how do I interact with them?
I teach a workshop on conflict. And what I like to suggest is we all come to work with these little bubbles above our heads, and they all represent our concerns and problems that we bring from home. And a lot of us come to the work environment expecting that the organization, will solve all of our problems. And when they don't, the potential for conflict is high. Anytime you have more than one person, the potential for conflict is there. And so I think the best thing that you can do when you run into a person at work who doesn't necessarily have these ideals is to have a pleasing personality. You be the person that compromises, that smiles. The most muscles we have in our face, I think they're like 60 or so, and we don't use them very much. You don't have to be defensive. You try to go for win-win solutions. You have a pleasing personality. You're friendly. You listen. You ask questions, and you smile. It's very hard to have a conflict with a person who's like that. So I think that's all you can do. We can, as I told one of my students the other day, we cannot make people become self-aware. This is on them. But don't ever give up coaching, because I think when trust is in place, people are more open to coaching. But when you run into those people, I think that's all you can do. You can't change them. People have to change themselves.
Okay. Our next question is from Killingdon Raj. How to generate or maintain the mindset of doing good and positive things without getting credits externally?
So there's a difference between internal motivation and external motivation. Those of us, and most of us, are externally motivated because that's the systems that we grew up under, based on B.F. Skinner's experiments with animals. I'll just leave it at that. And it's nothing wrong with a reward, or someone says I love you, or here's $100, or you pat on the back. But the problem is when we're just waiting for that, often we're not going to get an external reward, and we're going to feel disappointed and feel bad about ourselves. It's much better to develop internal motivation, which will last a lifetime. From my research, I don't think it's possible to motivate people, so we shouldn't try. We can, through the threat of punishment and the promise of reward, we can nudge people a little bit, motivate people a little bit short term, but eventually they'll fall off the cliff. So I think another key aspect of humanistic leadership is teaching people how to motivate themselves, which will last a lifetime. And too many of our systems, which I have to admit, like 40% of Fortune 500 companies in the US are now getting rid of the performance reviews, which, I've been writing about for years, how that defeats morale in the organization. So I'm happy to see that the ways we work collaboratively is starting to replace some of the old, motivational schemes. But I think we have to develop and teach people how to motivate themselves.
Mhm.
Internal motivation is abundant. Like all of you have the ability right this moment to be inherently happy, to motivate yourself. It's all internal. There's plenty for everyone, but we have to teach people how to do that because we grew up in school and in our systems focused on, some external reward.
Yeah, or thinking that happiness is an external condition versus an internal desire. Okay, well, thank you for that. Now, Anil Maheshwari has a question. I agree that self-awareness is the key first step. From deep self-awareness can come dharma or purpose or calling, that can lead to joyful work. How does one develop self-awareness as a leader?
It's the things I talked about earlier. It's figuring out the things I talked about earlier. And what is your purpose in life? Where do you want to make a difference? And how do you do that? What does that look like? How do you operationalize that? What are your values? Creating a roadmap for your life. One of the models I created is called the joyful work model, and there's 5 stages. And the first stage is the treadmill. Most of us spend our lives on the treadmill. We're on it because we want to get in good shape, but none of us really like it. And many times this is what work can feel like, the treadmill. And sometimes you fall off the treadmill. Maybe somebody attractive walks by and you look and you fall off. In life, I call that the stage 4, which is a trigger event. We all have things in life that cause us to be temporarily uncomfortable. It could be a death. It could be just, you don't feel good that day. Whenever you have a trigger event in life, it's important not to go back to the treadmill, but to move forward to the 3rd stage, which is reflection. And so I think when we reflect, that is the opportunity, whether it takes a day, a month, a year, or more, to build a new roadmap for your life. If we can reflect and move forward, then we go to the 2nd stage, which I call change. And then change leads to a new beginning. I've never met anyone that got to Dharma, got to a new beginning and said, I'll just go back to the treadmill. So this is what I teach in terms of the joyful work model. And I think, again, I think the most important business indicator that any leader can measure is the amount of joy that people have at work. And people will say to me, well, you can't do that. How can you do that? It's actually quite simple. You ask people, do you enjoy your work? Yes or no? And be willing to support them based on their answer. Same thing as with motivation. What motivates you and why? And as a leader, be prepared to do something with their answer. If there's trust built up over time, people will answer. So.
And that your response brought up something that I'd like to ask about, and that is values. What is your experience with your students being in touch or aware of their values, or people in the workplace? I just did a values exercise with my class. I'm teaching freshmen this year, and I was kind of shocked. I mean, it didn't occur to some of them that they even had values. And so I was wondering, is that a California thing, or is it, in your experience? And maybe in the audience, you could type in the chat what your experience, teaching values is too.
Yeah, I think if you're deeply religious, you may have had more experience with this, but in general, I think people don't understand values. I try to teach that values are end states, END. So if you say I value money, really? Do you value independence? Okay, then one of your values is independence. But it's really thinking deeply. It's a long exercise I take my students through, and when they're through, they feel pretty excited. Like, wow, I guess I tell people to be selfish. Be really selfish, because unless you're following your values, no one around you is going to be happy. So I think we have to teach people what is most important to you, and most importantly, how do you know if you're following it? I could say that health is really important, but I don't exercise, I don't sleep well, I don't have a good diet, and then that's why I'm not following my value. So no, I don't think people are that much aware of their values. We're all too busy, especially with the internet. We're all scrolling. We got to go back to some basics. But I don't think people are aware of their values. I think they need help.
Okay, maybe that's another leadership intervention point then, huh? Part of that self-awareness piece of it.
That's why it's on the top of the tier, yeah.
And then Anil Maharishi said, I also agree that collective thinking can facilitate dignity and group action, but can also lead to higher power distance and autocracy. Yet some of the most resources and power and success resides with individualistic countries. How do you reconcile that?
So I don't have a good answer. That's an excellent question. I guess it depends how you measure success in a culture. I mean, individually, I like to tell people that, you know, your measure of success should be getting to your goals on time. I think for a culture, for an organization, it's the same. I think for a country, I think it's the same, but I think it's also looking at, you know, greater Earth, greater society, and saying, you know, how, you know, whether it's a nation, a company, a classroom, an individual, again, you have to ask yourself, you know, does getting to my goals on time help or hurt other people, or society? And that's a tough one. And I think if the answer is it's not helping, then I think you're optimizing yourself, but you're sub-optimizing everybody else. So I think there is a way to work, for example, collectively, and yet in a humanistic way. I absolutely think that's true. So I don't know. I can't wrap my head around who's better, who's worse, based on individualism or collectivism. All I could tell you is I step back, I look at the world today, we're in big trouble, and we're not sustainable for all the reasons. From, you know, somebody could push a button tomorrow. We all know what I'm speaking about, and we're all gone. And if we're that close, if the atomic clock from 1940 is now at, like, I don't know, 15 seconds to midnight, okay, then we need a new way forward. So I just rise to the top and says, okay, I don't know how to deal with that question, but I could tell you as a humanity, we're in big trouble. And I hope I'm wrong, but, you know, we got to try something. And, you know, everybody has to make a dent in the world. This is my dent in the world, humanistic leadership, trying to influence people. Maybe somewhere, this will make a difference. I don't know.
Right.
And give hope that there is a possible for another way. I'm sorry, Jen.
Yeah, I was just going to jump in. One of the concepts I like for that, this part of the discussion, is the idea of embedded autonomy, right? I think individuality versus collectivism is a false dichotomy. We can and should be doing both simultaneously, right? It's not either or, it's both and. And so I like the concept of embedded autonomy as a way to kind of encapsulate, we have to both protect the individual dignity and work collectively. That is like the human, like that's how human tribes have always managed to, like, survive. So.
Okay. And Sweat had said there is an email, someone who might be interested in partnering on research. So we'll send the chat out afterwards. And then Marty Schumacher said, youth coming from the social justice narratives in university are very sensitive to preventing microaggressions, which are very subjective and can be defined as you just hurt my feelings. How do you discuss this new trend of what Jonathan Haidt calls coddling of American youth to face their fears in the workplace in the humanistic leadership model?
I try to raise up the conversation to inclusion and appreciation. How could you include and appreciate people who are different than you? Young people are afraid to speak in person because they grew up on their phones. They much rather text. And I tell my students, you must have a voice in the world, but just make sure it's respectful. And then I teach them about, you know, conscientiousness and being, you know, being a systems thinker and so on. So with those skills, I think our youth can start to speak out more their opinions and feel good about it, but in respectful ways. And then a lot of the perceived hurts and microaggressions and you know, I'm just going to stay in my shell. I think over time that will start to change, but that is a generational challenge right now, and it got worse because of COVID. Right, all our youth, instead of working on those things, they stayed home more. You know, so I think it's a huge challenge. But again, through humanistic leadership, I think we could help everyone.
Just real quick, we have about 10 minutes left. So just as we start to wrap up.
I was hoping we can go all day, Jennifer.
It would be nice. There's so much we can discuss.
Let's see. And so Alex Fong asks, how do you approach the teaching of your model to undergraduates and senior executives differently? Do you find undergraduates or senior business executives more responsive to your model, and why?
Both. So for my students, I teach the model, we have exercises and so on. With senior executives, I do the same thing, but of course I try to prepare in advance and put all of the content and examples, from their company into the model. So we talk about, what does systems thinking look like in your company? What are the systems that are operating in your company? Which ones are working well? Which ones are not working well? What are the unintended consequences of, like, I work with an organization recently that, they do nursing, at home nursing. So when you send nurses out to someone's home, what are the things that could happen if you're not prepared with patients? So in other words, I try to take the content and absolutely just match it to the company's content. Who could argue? So they walk away with, real things to work on. So that's what I do. And then when I do the self-awareness piece, of course, everybody's kind of interested in that. Who at work has time to think about their own self-awareness? So that generally goes pretty well. But to answer your question, the CEOs are very interested when we work on their content. And that's, of course, what I want to do. If I just talked in general, I wouldn't be invited back.
So tethering it to their real life problems and issues they're dealing with, their daily experiences. Dr. Alanazi has another question. Humanistic leaders sometimes are faced by inhuman policies of their organizations. So I guess change should start first at the macro level. Otherwise, it will be difficult to implement any parts of these model.
Yep. Yeah, the leader of the system influences the behavior. That's why, a country culture, you can't really change. It goes back thousands of years. It's very hard to change a corporate culture, even if you have a new leader. If you're in an organization and you're feeling that you're being stifled from being humanistic, you have to leave. Start your own company. Work for another organization where you feel more aligned. There's only so much you can do in your team if everyone around you is sort of let's say, call it non-humanistic. I don't think anybody's non-humanistic, but we tend to focus so much on profit that we just kind of run over each other.
Yeah, I would say inhumane. A lot of workplaces are inhumane, right? And that builds on Jessica's Coleman's question. How can we change the understanding of profit from short-term gains to long-term sustainability? Humanistic management clearly looks at the longer term rather than short-term gains.
Well, I'm not an economist, and this is being recorded. So I suppose if I said, well, get rid of capitalism, then I would be in trouble. So I won't say that. But I don't know what the solution is, but the capitalistic systems that we most of us work under today, I would say they're not working. I'll just say that they're working for some, maybe the 1 or 2%, but for most people, they're not working. I mean, 20 or 30,000 people die a day of starvation, not because there's not enough food in the world, but because we let other things get in the way. So I think our systems are not working. And I propose that we change them. To what? I don't know. That would be an amazing conversation. And it's not about capitalism versus socialism. It's about, we need a new way forward.
Yeah, well, I'll throw out one thing I'm working on, which is social accounting as an intervention. Basically, how do we account for our values? And if we're only accounting for one thing we value, money, it's not surprising that we've gotten to this. So anyways, it looks like people are also putting emails for their collaboration opportunities. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I also encourage you to follow me on LinkedIn. I mean, every day I try to post these ideas just to build a network, and maybe through my network you'll be connected, because I do have a lot of students and so on that follow me. So feel free to connect on LinkedIn. At my website, Dr.Nathanson.com, I have 20 years of my work and so on. So.
Wonderful. I think we have time for one last short question.
Most of the things I'm seeing now are thanks and emails and that kind of thing. Do you have one last question, Jen?
No, I think what we might do is ask Craig to give us his final thoughts. What does he want to leave us with?
It's a big, heavy question. I don't underestimate the personal power and influence that each of you have in the world. If you're walking down the street and you see garbage and you pick it up, probably somebody behind you is going to think maybe I should pick up the garbage too. So don't think that you can't make a difference. As the founder of LinkedIn said, there's only six or seven people that separate you and the other 8 billion people in the world, because 50 people and they know 50 people and they know 50 people. And if you compound the math, we're all connected to pretty much everybody in the world. So I guess the thing I'll leave you with is, if you can be a humanistic leader of yourself and other people, you will absolutely make a huge difference in the world. And right now, I don't know how many people are on the call, but if we have 30 or 40 people here, we absolutely could make a huge difference in the world right now. And I would encourage you each and every day to get up with that energy, that passion, that spirit, that you can make a difference, a positive difference in the world. And why not through humanistic leadership?
Thank you
Okay.
so much for that. I mean, that's a really great way to end it, because for me, my practice as a humanist is to be it, like actually do it for myself, in the hopes that it helps every little bit. Elizabeth, did you have a final thought before?
No, just gratitude. This has been such an inspiring conversation, and I can tell from the comments I'm seeing in the chat that everybody feels similarly. So thank you so much, Craig, and just for reminding us, why we're here, and the importance of just not trying to solve all the problems in the world, but start with ourselves and the ripple effects out.
Wonderful.
I'll be cheering for you each step of the way.
Thank you. I want to thank everyone for participating in the session today. If you enjoyed this program, we hope you'll consider joining the community and become a member of the International Humanistic Management Association at our website, humanisticmanagement.international. We're looking for people to help serve on our boards and committees. It's not just a USA thing. We have chapters all over the world. So if you want to get more involved, please reach out to us and let us know. Send us an email. Or use the contact form on the website. In addition to supporting the work of the association, members also enjoy the ability to network with other like-minded individuals. You can post about your work on our in the membership site and to our website, and maybe even get in our newsletter. So thank you everyone for our support. Our next Lunch and Learn is in December. So we'll see you there.
Take care, everyone. Thank you so much.